Are you, am I on? Am I live? All right. Hi, this is Constance. I am one of the CEOs of Ghost Rock Digital along with my husband, Nicola, and this is our second ever live stream. The first we did on Facebook, so this is a test run for YouTube. I don't expect to get much engagement because it's the first time on YouTube. But I'm here on a basic Monday drinking a basic cuvee from Walgreens because I'm a basic you know what. Right, so today we talk about the demise of influencers, the rise of LinkedIn, and other notable subjects. I would ultimately like to make this a program that happens weekly where you can bring in all kinds of crazy questions in the comments and we'll just answer them. We do get a lot of questions. We're a new company, we're a new business, but even still, we get a lot of questions about what we do and how to do it. I think because the digital frontier is so overwhelming for people who have small businesses, mid-sized businesses, or if they're pursuing a personal brand, there's like a lot of information to take in and a lot that's expected of them to put out. So they ask us a lot of questions about that. So I will bring up a couple of recent questions we've gotten, or questions we have gotten in the past multiple times from different people, which suggests that there's more than one person out there who wants answers to these questions. But I want to start with the demise of the influencer. So what is an influencer? That's a good thing to ask. You have a macro influencer, over 1 million followers, someone who demands like national or international attention. We're talking like the Kim Kardashians of the world. But then you also have a micro influencer, and these people typically go on a city to city basis. They have a community of people who are local and support their local sort of viewpoint on the latest and the greatest for that particular city or region. And each of them has, in recent years, been very valuable to PR and advertising agencies. However, in the last year or so, there has been a demise of trust for the influencer. So I suggest being careful. But first, I want to point out what just popped up in the news this morning on the BBC about a Nashville influencer. So Nicola, if you will help me pull up that article. This is an interesting case because this is a case where an influencer, she is from the Southeast, which a lot of people are very keen to promote and want they want the economy of the Southeast to rise. She's from Nashville, very hip city right now. She has a little over 200,000 followers. And in this particular case, she actually got in a motorcycle accident. A lot of people question that on the post that she made about it, but I do believe that she actually got in a motorcycle accident. And she happened to have a photographer friend with her who took pictures throughout the ordeal and posted them on Instagram with a long explanation, tagging her tattoo artist, saying that she might need a touch up because of her scrapes and all these other things that caused controversy online. And the article points out something I think that's interesting. Not that, she was advertising her trauma, and the pictures are very beautiful of her motorcycle accident, which is weird in and of itself, but that the instinct was to advertise the trauma, and the instinct of the followers was to not believe it happened. So that puts into question a lot about the value of hiring influencers to promote your brand. And this is something I'm on the fence about personally as a digital agency, because a lot of influencers are asking top dollar, thousands of dollars to make a couple social media posts and maybe a blog. And is it worth it? I don't know. How do they report that ROI? They can say that they got so many views or so many clicks, but how do you actually prove that their output is making money for that brand? It's hard to say. Clearly, like a surge in sales immediately after they post their content may have a correlation, but a correlation is just a correlation. As anyone who's familiar with scientific studies will say, it doesn't provide proof. that's one thing. The other thing is, I mean, influencers by nature have become influencers in order to make money off of their content. But once that money is exchanged and people know about it, there is a psychological thing that happens. It sort of dirties that relationship between the follower and the influencer, because they say, oh, well, they got paid to collaborate on this. So the assumption is that they can't possibly say anything bad about that brand, product, or destination because they're receiving a paycheck for it. That's the assumption, even if it's not the case. And having viewed influencer contracts in the past, indeed, there are clauses that say the influencer is not obliged to say anything positive about this brand. However, just from a business relationship perspective, it's not that they're not obliged to, but would they say anything negative unless something absolutely obnoxious happened? Would they? I mean, there's always that awareness that they're receiving a check for this in the end. So that breach of trust has happened between the follower and the influencer once they start accepting paychecks for what they do. That's also a big question. But it is still something that is very present, and it's something that we think about a lot as a company, particularly because we work with hotels and restaurants and travel industry, tourist destinations, etc. This is a big deal. People put a lot of stock in the power of the influencer. And I think there needs to be a lot of careful planning around hiring an influencer and asking them to your property. And also, do you really need it? That needs to be a question. Do I really need this type of interface with influencers? And can I, as a property or as a product, be an influencer myself? Or is there somebody on my team who's leading my team, say the CEO of my company, who has the potential to be an influencing personality? And that would be an influencer that supports your company directly, but is just an engaging and charismatic individual with a lot of interesting content and good advice to give. That's another question to ask. Do you need to hire an influencer, or can you be an influencer? Can someone on your team be your own influencer exclusively for your company? That's a legitimate question to ask. So influencers are they're going through a weird phase right now. I think I have, Nicola, what's the other research I sent you for that particular topic? There were a couple of other articles that I just wanted to point out. One is the Fyre Festival, for sure. And if you guys haven't watched the Hulu documentary and the Netflix documentary on the whole shakedown of the Fyre Festival, that is like, first of all, it's influencers influencing the public who were then influenced by a shady marketing plan. That was like some weird cycle of deception that happened that convinced these kids with way too much money to blow to buy $1,000 tickets out to an island to a festival that didn't really exist. And the influencers themselves were fooled in this case because money talks. And that is by far one of the most notorious cases from the last, few years, handful of years. So I think influencer marketing has come under scrutiny because of that, and also other incidents. So there was that one, the Fyre Festival, and what was the other one I sent you? Yeah, two about the Fyre Festival. Just a second. I'm going to get my phone. Which is nowhere to be found. Okay, it's over here. Yeah, and the Fyre Festival is crazy because the Netflix one, just FYI, was produced by the same marketing company that was involved with the Fyre Festival. And the Hulu documentary was very critical of that, which I find really interesting, that these two documentaries on subsequent streaming services are going after each other, which is also a new kind of thing that's happening. Okay.
Like
Well,
one of influencers becoming influenced right now.
okay, so influencers becoming influencers, what I just described. You have, I mean, when we're saying influencers here, we're talking about models, um, essentially models, models and people in the fashion world or the socialite celebrity world who exist as influencers merely for what they look like, their style, and their own personal brand, who were paid money or hired to promote a festival that had no real planning or budget behind it. So I think, one of the Kardashians was implicated in that. It was paid like $250,000 to post an orange square. When I say an orange square, just an orange block of color. And of course, it went viral because a few other models and celebrities who were brought on to as influencers in this campaign also posted the orange square promoting Fire Festival. And ultimately, that's what sold the tickets. But they thought they were promoting a real festival. So in that case, the influencers were basically duped for something that didn't exist because of the influence of this one CEO who was running the festival. He's the one who convinced them. So now you have this weird cycle of influence based on nothing of substance. And that's why we have to question ourselves as agencies and as brands and products. What are we actually doing here? Are we offering things of legitimate value to the end consumer? And as my husband and business partner often says, and I think this is very wise of him, you have to love your customer more than you love your brand or product. And that is a very wise mantra to live by. So do these influencers love their customers or their fans more than they love those paychecks they're getting from brands? It's a big question. I think probably not. It's not a long-term plan.
Their ad video looks good.
Their what?
Their ad video looks good.
Yeah, their ad video for Fire Festival looked great. That was that's what the whole scheme was based off on. Based off was one video. They sent a bunch of people out on a boat to look beautiful on the ocean, swimming around drinking cocktails. Not that we have anything against that in advertising. But it wasn't delivering any kind of substance. So
Yeah, there's a photo of dinner they were served. Bread, cheeses.
I'm sure they had a great time. He said there's a photo of dinner they were served. Yeah, I'm sure they had a great time.
Just looks like,
Okay, I'm trying to...
Like a sandwich you get on a bad, like, plane ride.
Yeah, okay, look, this is very trippy. I'm looking at myself streaming right now. I'm going to turn this down. And then I'm going to share a link. Yeah, show the video so people can see. Don't be fooled.
Oh, wait a second, what video?
Show the Fire Festival video.
Oh, yeah, I have.
Yeah. Yeah, don't be fooled by, I mean, we like making pretty videos, for sure. But don't be fooled by a pretty video. that's the lesson we've learned here.
Ours are not that pretty.
Ours are pretty. Ours are very pretty. But yeah, it takes more than that. You actually have to follow through with the substance at the end, the actual product, the quality of the product. Okay, so here we have a live stream. I'm going to share it with other people here. Because really, I'd like to be answering people's questions, so it's more of a conversation. So let's see if they tune in. We're live now on YouTube talking about influencers, Fyre Fest fallout. I like that. It has a nice alliteration to it. And next, I'm going to talk about The rise of LinkedIn. Okay, LinkedIn. Bing. And link share. Paste. Publish. All right, we're out. So I'm going to keep my page open here on, so I'm keeping the Ghost Rock page open on Facebook. So if you want to, if somebody puts a comment on the post or they want to respond, by all means, I will keep tabs on it and we'll try to answer questions. Next, I want to talk about the rise of LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn has been around for a while.
I'd like to ask you something, actually, now that you were talking about influencers.
Okay, let's go back to influencers. What's the question?
It's my question.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think of content creators as influencers? Going from like gamers.
Oh no, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that.
PewDiePie or people like that who are actually like.
Okay, so when I'm
actually make content, they don't just exist. They actually do something.
I actually think content creators I would put in a different category altogether. So Nicola asked, what do I think of content creators versus influencers? So when we're dividing up the two.
Content creators as influencers.
Okay, content creators as influencers.
Are you taking over from influencers who just look pretty and take Instagram photos?
Okay, let me repeat your question. Hold up. So he wants to know if about content creators as influencers. So content creators we're talking about here, Twitch streamers, gamers, people who review products on YouTube who offer, I think, much more value than an Instagram influencer. So are they taking over from the Instagram influencer craze? I don't know if they're taking over as much as they're a totally different subset of influence. And I think they're more valuable, but there's also more of a niche. Does that make sense? But overall, they have more substantive value to the content they're creating. So for instance, like Nicola and I, we watch YouTube tutorials or reviews of products all the time, and we get a lot of value from that. So I would trust the advice of someone who has a background in, say, technology or cameras, in Nicola's case, or whatever we're acquiring for our company. We would watch YouTube reviews of that from people who are respected within the community, and we may use that as part of our research before we acquire new equipment. But that has substantive value. There's a background of knowledge that this person has. This person has the product in hand. They've used it. They've experimented with it. They've found its weak points, and they're talking honestly and openly about it and with clarity. And that is, I think, a very different thing than someone being given a free hotel room and $5,000 to sit on a beach and take one picture. And the beach doesn't showcase anything about the property or their actual full experience of that property. So I do think that content creators who create regular, consistent content have their following, I think, is much more loyal to them. That's a big part of it. So I think their following is incredibly loyal. Like, it's actually a community of people, especially on, for instance, there's a couple Twitch content creators that Nicola watches regularly, and you would say that the users that are the chat that is corresponding with this content creator is probably the same few hundred people that watch all the time, as well as several thousand people, but they're all very loyal. I mean, we watch the same people all the time. We just keep them in the background while we're working. So I think there's much more substance to that. And
so what do you think about like Twitch streamers signing big contracts and promoting brands and that kind of stuff?
I think that that's the thing. It's tricky. Okay, that's not I thought somebody was asking me a question, but they're not. I think that's a really tricky question, because if they were to sign contracts with big money, they would have to be very transparent about how they're going to approach that relationship with that brand. Like, it doesn't oblige them in any way, shape, or form of giving a good review for that product.
Well, they're not giving reviews technically. I mean, especially not while streaming. But just them endorsing the product or product sponsoring them, that creates like a link to this product and their followers.
I think that's a better way to do it. Because right now, that's not how influencers do it. Okay, so Nicholas said that they don't review the product. They don't like...
You can hear me.
Can you? Okay, so anyway, I think that's a much better way to do it. They just sponsor the talent, essentially. It's the same way that like a sponsor would sponsor a NASCAR driver. You know? So it's just like the NASCAR driver isn't going to drive differently because Coca-Cola's on its car. It's just like that's who sponsored the car, you know. They're still going to drive like a race car driver and try to win. So I think sponsorship in that regard, what they're sponsoring is your access to a demographic that they want or that they already have. So Monster is a really good example of that. So the Monster energy drink brand is sponsoring currently one of the biggest gamers. Is that right? Is that what you told me yesterday? They're sponsoring Ninja?
I think
So Monster energy drinks are sponsoring Ninja, which is a big gamer. And his demographic is exactly the kind of guys who would buy Monster energy drinks on a regular basis, like guys who game late at night and need a pick-me-up. So I think that's really smart of them. They don't ask Ninja to do anything specific, right? They're not asking him for anything. Am I right about that?
I don't know. I don't watch Ninja.
Okay, so in that particular case, I think that's wise because they're basically just buying ad placement on his channel and sponsoring that particular host. The other way to do it is I've seen podcasters. For instance, I don't know if anyone watches like Tom Segura and Christina Pidzinski, his wife and fellow comedian. They do Your Mom's House podcast. At the beginning of the podcast, they give like a shout out to their sponsors. It's like a mattress company and a manscaping. And they're just like, they sponsor the podcast and they're like, thanks to our sponsors. And they read a little thing. Sometimes it's funny and they augment it with their own humor, but they're free to do whatever they want during the show. It's not, they just read the little sponsorship piece and let people know that the show is sponsored, but the show itself has nothing to do with those two services. It's just that particular brand recognized that the demographic of people they want to reach is engaging and watching this content, and so they sponsor it without any expectation. I think it's different when you have an influencer who's, say, an Instagram influencer, and you actually invite them to your property, you invite them to your restaurant, and all they have to, they're just communicating through one image. And they'd write a blog post which essentially is like a watered down review of the places they've been. That I think it's a trickier relationship, and maybe not as profitable for either.
So do you think the traditional influencers are going out, apparently, or according to some sources, like Instagram influencers and such, that content creators are going to become the next top tier?
I do think content creators are going to start taking precedence. I think that they've had a strong influence on their particular niche markets for a long time, and it's stabilized. They didn't do the same thing that Instagram influencers did, where they spiked for a couple of years, and now they've just recently started to take a downturn. They've actually stayed stable because they're offering something of value, and they've built a community of people who are very loyal to them. So I think that they will, I don't think they're going to take over. I think they can continue growing at a steady pace. Because look at what we're trying to do. I'm here talking kind of to you and kind of to this black void of a camera, the big dark eye, and in the hopes that we offer something of value to people who want to tune in to us. So, of course, feedback, please, people, feedback. What a value do you want? But there's also, like, we're not original in this. There's many other people, like if, Gary Vaynerchuk of VaynerMedia, he's like all over the internet he does one of these for a couple of hours and then breaks it up to like 1,000 pieces of content that just, he puts up all over the internet. And he's a media influencer. So he's a digital media influencer. And that's what he's made his brand on, his personal brand, which now carries something like over 600 employees at different locations, for VaynerMedia. So he is a content creator. He is not an Instagram influencer. He creates substantial content that, is either motivational or informative or whatever. And he's very transparent with his processes that he, puts out publicly for people to take and steal. So I think that he has quite a lot of influence and power in the business sector. So he's an example of a content creator who has staying power beyond being an Instagram influencer. The influencers that I think they're on their way out are those oversaturated, mainly Instagram or photography-based influencers who have staged their lives to the point where they can't be trusted anymore. They've created basically a magazine profile, a series of images that they can't be trusted as reality anymore. And the images for a long time were like very oversaturated, had very specific color themes, and there was a trend going on of these particular kind of lifestyle influencers. And I think that's on its way out. I think that real, authentic content creators that create transparent, deep dive, substantial, raw, dirty stuff, that's the wave of the future. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. So we're in agreement about that. That was easy. We getting questions, comments? So
here's a good
segue. You have a segue?
Instagram influencer versus, I just wanted to check this, versus YouTube content creator.
Okay.
PewDiePie has more followers on YouTube than Kendall Jenner has on Instagram.
There you go. And anyone who doesn't know what PewDiePie is, he was a controversial figure.
They're there.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, not really. PewDiePie has 100.3 million, and Kendall Jenner has 115 million, but still.
Yeah.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. It's definitely getting there. And I do think that, but like I said, it's not a replacement. I think it's always been there. I think it's just that, well, particularly, let's talk about the industry we work in with our clients. So we work in travel, tourism, hotels, hospitality, restaurants, etc. These particular kinds of businesses have relied heavily. It's my basic cuvée talking. Heavily on Instagram style influencers. So people who come to your property, they get a bunch of free stuff. They get also a paycheck on top of that, and they take pictures and they edit them and filter them so they look oversaturated and they are the center of attention and look beautiful inside of your property or with your food or eating your meal, etc. And that particular industry,
You're just sitting there eating your meal.
yeah, they're eating their meal. They have like a plate of food. They take a picture in the room, and it's usually something like this with a hat It looks like that. It's like that's the pose. Um, but there's no substance being offered, and that's the problem I have with particularly travel and foodie influencers. I feel like there is opportunity there for more substance. And this is a strategy I highly recommend everybody steal. Very transparent, and it's a strategy we want to implement with our clients. You can take it. I don't care because we'll save this video and it has a time signature. So the strategy is I would approach, if you are to market to transient travel, to go to the cities where you know your biggest draw is going to be from or where you want it from. Find the micro influencers and either encourage them or try to find micro influencers that have more substantial content than just an Instagram profile, and then court them specifically so that they can showcase your property and your offering from the viewpoint of a resident of their city. And I think that would have a much more impactful, authentic effect for that demographic and probably a lot more ROI because it's going to be something people can really connect to. So I'm talking about maybe a YouTube content creator who does a lot of videos about travel and resides or is a native of LA, for example. And you bring them to your up and coming Midwestern town, and they showcase the town from their perspective as somebody from the West Coast. And you trust them to do that and in an artistic way that offers valuable content for somebody who would be from the West Coast who might think of traveling to your town. So that I think would be a more substantial partnership than hiring someone on Instagram who travels around the world and takes pictures of themselves in hotel rooms that are both nondescript and, I just don't feel like Instagram influencers are going to have the next generation of consumers' attention. That's what I think. Nikolai, what do you think of that strategy?
I agree. As much as I've heard, somebody was.
He's distracted. But anyway, yes, generally he agrees. So that would be my influencer strategy. So can we talk about LinkedIn now?
I want to take a little break.
A break? Do you have to do something?
Well, just take a little break.
Okay, I'm going to take a break. I am going to get some more basic witch cuvee. So We're back. All right, let's talk about LinkedIn. You ready? You ready for some LinkedIn chat? What was that? No, he was sitting right here. Come here, Fitz. Come here. Come here. So LinkedIn has been around for a while. So it's not really fair to say like the rise of LinkedIn. This is Fitz, everybody. Say hi. LinkedIn is experiencing a surge in popularity, is a better way to say it. And I think there's a few reasons for this. One, Facebook has become untrustworthy to users. I think you read an article the other day, Nicola, that they lost like a third of their users around the world in the last couple of years due to various scandals, Cambridge Analytica. I don't know. Huh? Is that just in the UK?
I think so.
Okay. Well, in any case, they still dominate the social platform sphere. However, people are getting frustrated with them, and they've got a lot of bad PR in the last few years because of Russian intervention, et cetera, et cetera. So, but people still want that social platform experience. So it's not that they're saying all social media is bad. They still want it, but they're looking for other platforms that are far less offensive and noisy. And LinkedIn is one of them, because there's an understanding when you're on LinkedIn that you're all professionals there, and that the purpose of LinkedIn is to be a professional space where people can network with each other, learn from each other, and share inspiration. And there's a lot of things I like about LinkedIn. So one of the things I like is that they don't put emphasis on followers. So this is a great segue from our last discussion about influencers. So when you have 500 plus followers on LinkedIn, they just put 500 plus. It doesn't matter if you have 501 or 3,000. It doesn't matter. It's still just 500 plus. So that emphasizes the quality of what you're offering people in terms of your posts and the quality you make in connections over your influence in terms of numbers. So that I agree with. And it seems to be working for them. Like, people don't even look at the 500 plus because everybody who's got 500 or more followers has the same 500 plus on their page. So it ceases to be relevant. What's relevant is the quality of what they're putting out there and the level of engagement they have with other users. So that, I think, is a very positive thing that is attractive to people. Another thing I liked about LinkedIn is that because you have this once you join, people understand the purpose is for professional development, they tend to stick to that. So there are few and far between people who I think violate these terms and policies, and LinkedIn is pretty quick to react when it does happen. So that is very attractive to people as well. And it's also a platform that encourages in-depth posting. So by in-depth posting, I mean posting articles that are like blog format articles. That they make it very easy to do that. Posting long-form written written content, so long-form copywriting in a post. Things that they just started their beta live streaming, which we look very much forward to participating in once it's opened up more broadly. This is something that I think for all these reasons, LinkedIn is really ahead of the game. They also offer very, very direct targeting advertising opportunities. So to give you an example, I know there's a lot of marketers who hate the in-message sponsored ads. However, I don't agree with avoiding them altogether. I find them as a marketer very, very useful for directing specific companies with a great deal. But you have to have those two things in play. So it's a specific company, so it's not about your reach is just within the employees of that company. and you're offering just that company a particularly great deal, or just that segment of the industry a particularly great deal that they can't get anywhere else, and it's an exclusive offer through that platform. I think in that case it works. I think if it's just general messaging, it's a waste of time. Because you're dealing with professionals who, by all accounts, have some experience and understand the power of being connected on a social platform like LinkedIn, and you can't approach them with a general sales pitch and a message and expect any kind of respect in exchange. It just won't happen. They'll just delete it, and probably ignore it, or if they even open it. But if you are offering them a great deal that's exclusive to them and whatever market segment they represent, then yes, you will get a very high click-through rate. So I think we have a client now who has like a 75% click-through rate on the messaging that we're using for a very specific company, incredibly targeted, with a very targeted deal that only applies to them. So in that particular case, it works very, very well. Your ads will be more expensive on a placement basis. However, the total ad spend is still very low. So LinkedIn is well worth it. Once they start taking off in popularity, because of the backlash against other social platforms, this little like bubble that they're existing in now won't last for long. It's going to transition into something else, but it's definitely something that people should take advantage of in terms of long form content, professional content. Executive visibility is very important. And LinkedIn is a great place to do it. Industry visibility, very important. LinkedIn is a great place to do it. Publish as many articles as you can, even if they're very short, but just get your voice and your opinion out there. Same thing with posts. You can make them longer on LinkedIn. And people who are engaged will read them. And if you read through the comments, I find it fascinating on LinkedIn. You'll find a lot more educated, experienced, and truly engaged comments than you will on other social platforms. So this is a great medium. In fact, I think it's the only social medium for B2B advertising. It's the only social medium, I think, for HR and human resources. So I can't say enough good things about LinkedIn at the moment. That may change in the future because social platforms change so quickly in the way and how they adjust to the volume of users and how they're adjusting to the times. We'll see what happens. It may be that their advertising becomes so outrageously expensive it's not worth it anymore. But that is where we're at now. They're having they're having a moment, and I think that it's really wise for anyone in the B2B industry or in HR or executives to take advantage of. Yeah, that's it. Do we have any questions about that? Yeah, the LinkedIn interface is great. We've gotten questions in person, not on social platforms yet, but in person, kind of generally about starting a business, about managing clients versus customers, and about how to get started in general. And that's a question I find comes up again and again with people with small businesses. Would you agree, Nicola? Like how to just get started?
Yeah, or how to tell your story. That's
how to tell your story.
Question we get.
Yeah, how to tell your story is the most common question we get. And it's not something you can answer generally because every story is very unique. You have to approach it from the perspective of your brand and where your audience lives. So one brand's audience may live on YouTube, while another brand's audience may live on LinkedIn, and another one might live on Facebook, and another one might live on Instagram, etc. You have to find where your audience lives and then tell your story authentically. But authentically doesn't mean, I think sometimes authentically means to people posting crap pictures in the moment or like fuzzy video of something and then using like 50 hashtags. That's not what we mean by authentically. What we mean is like it's true to you, but it still needs to be quality enough that people can actually embrace it as a professional business or a product. So it's not your grandma posting content. It's a professional business or a product that understands quality control, but it still has an authentic story inside of it. Can you think of an example of a story, like a product or a story that we got recently that might make a good example of that?
I wasn't really following this. When I listen to it, I get a delay.
Okay, got it. Right. So for instance, chill fits. We're talking about stories. So I'll give you two examples. We were approached by a consultancy firm recently, and that consultancy firm had some questions about telling a story. And he went through his whole thing of what he does. Like, I think the deck he sent us, the slideshow he sent us, was like 75 slides. It was insanely long and very complicated and full of graphs and charts and non-layman terms and, in-depth knowledge, but it didn't say anything. And at the end, I felt he went through the segments he thought were important, and at the end I felt like this is so unimportant to me as an employer who has never worked directly with HR and the science behind HR, that I've lost myself inside the data and the information. But at the very end of our meeting, he brought out a map that he had drawn, just very roughly with markers, of a little series of fictional, fantastical islands. And each of these islands he named after a step in his human resources process. And he gave it some fantastical names, and they all had to do with some adventurous time in history. There was like a pirate island, there was an industrialist island, etc. And it was sloppy, it was done quickly, but it was his version of interpreting all of that data condensed down to one page and a drawing. And basically we told him that's where your story is. Like, that's your story. All of this data and experience is great. You can bring that up later after you've scored the client. But when you're talking to a client now, you want to talk about the map, the story, the visual representation of what you're doing and the adventure behind it. And just go full throttle with that, because that is essentially going to be the brand's story. And that brand is supported by expertise, which it should be. But the brand itself, the story itself, is not going to resonate with people unless it's clear and unless it's something they can relate to. So that's one example of a B2B business that we ran into that was struggling with how to tell story. And I think this happens a lot with startups and businesses that are early on because they're too in it to see the bigger picture. So the micro and the day-to-day tasks and the filing of your LLC paperwork and finding, how to do your taxes and finding people to work with you and maybe finding a partner and getting your all of your product offerings in order and all the day-to-day tasks that have to do with running a business take precedence over just telling your story. And so they get lost inside of this malaise of just getting stuff done, just answering the next email, instead of looking at the macro picture. And that macro picture is going to be the guiding light for all of those tasks. That's why sometimes people need help, I think. They need help telling those stories. So we can only help them as like from a digital perspective, but there are a lot of opportunities in the digital front. There's a lot of different ways to tell your stories. And when people do it themselves, they tend to get lost in that mire of which platform. I need to do all of them. I need to do this and that. I need to make X amount of posts, etc. It doesn't matter. I just put all of that aside. However often you're posting, screw it. I mean, just don't even think about it like that in volume. Think about it in quality of content and the platform that you feel or that you vetted to have your demographic following it. And you don't need to do all of them. Maybe you just do YouTube, and that's okay. That's what content creators do. Content creators who have millions of followers and are now getting sponsored by major brands. They just started on one channel. Maybe you do B2B. You only do LinkedIn. That's it. That's all you have to do. It's fine. That's it. Just make your LinkedIn the best rockin' freaking... Can I curse on YouTube? I mean, I see a lot of people doing it, but can I just like let it out of the bag?
You can't. I mean, I don't know what the policies are. It's not Twitch, so I don't think we're gonna get banned. But
We might get banned?
I don't think we will.
We won't get
Not
banned.
sure on YouTube.
But I feel like people curse all the time on YouTube.
They do, true enough.
Yeah, so I don't know if they get away with it because they have a massive following. All right, so this is all I have to say. Fuck it. Just focus on one platform at a time. So if you just want to do Facebook and you want to use Facebook Marketplace ads and you want to set up a Facebook shop and that's all you want to do because your demographic is between ages 35 to 55 and they're using that platform a lot, then just do it. Just do that one. Screw the rest. The only people who need to have a presence on every single platform are major companies whose different divisions and departments touch all of those platforms. A small business does not need to do all of the platforms, for sure. It will simplify your life and your whole processes if you just focus on one or two of the ones where your demographic resides predominantly. And then the second mammoth task is to use the platform well. Like, don't be bullshitty about it. Just, learn how to use the technology and use it well. I mean, don't post crappy pictures and, don't and say nothing about them. Try to keep your audience engaged by posting real time from things they actually care about, that are relevant to them, that build a community around your product or service to begin with in your local area and then expand it out from there. That's another thing we've noticed smaller business clients we've worked with as well, is that they want to go from their basement to dominating the world market in like one step. And it doesn't happen that way. Like, you need to have credibility and leverage to get to that final step. And that takes many years of work. But the best way to start is to energize your local community, get them behind you, get those supporters, and then go regional, and then go national. And each one of them is a step up. And by doing that, you create a sustainable brand, and you create a loyal following that's rooting you along the way. And if your product's quality and you're servicing your customers above your ideation of your brand, then they will support you throughout that process. That's really what you want. You don't want to get caught up in the ideology of what it means to be a business owner, or the ideology of what your brand or your product means, because it doesn't really mean anything. You're a business owner because you want to make money on your own terms. That's it. Full stop. You want to make money on your own terms. That's why you own a business. All of the fancy talk around, your mission statement, I know it's BS. You know it's BS. You want to make money on your own terms. And that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. It doesn't need to be justified. through magical thinking. Just say what it is. I want to make money on my own terms, and I do this thing really well, and I enjoy doing it. And I'd rather do that than work for somebody else. And that's the reality of owning a business. So be straightforward with that and just make the best quality product or service that you can to service your clients or customers. And the rest of it is just a matter of marketing. And marketing smart. That's it. Anything to say about that? No. That's all I have to say about that in particular thing. How long are we doing?
An hour.
We're an hour? It's a pretty good length. Yeah?
I still want to play your Vegas video.
Okay. So I'll use this last few minutes. We've been online an hour, just, shooting the shit. I've overcome my wall of not cursing. I'm just going to do it now and see what happens. Hopefully we won't get banned from YouTube. I don't think they have policies against that. Otherwise, I would have seen more of my favorite creators banned. We're at an hour. We'll do a pitch. So Ghost Rock, we call ourselves Ghost Rock Digital Online to differentiate ourselves from a couple other creative people who use the name Ghost Rock, but Ghost Rock is the name of our company. We exist in Louisville, Kentucky. We're opening a branch in Vegas. We have contacts out there already. And we have a little intro video that Nicola wants to play, showcasing a teaser, I suppose, from Vegas. So go ahead. And here we go.